In just 47 seconds, $2.3 million in taxpayer money. Kash Patel didn't expect the question. He certainly didn't expect the follow-up. Cameras captured everything. The room went silent. What did Representative Eric Swalwell reveal that made the FBI director lose his composure so completely that his own words became his downfall? At exactly 2:47 p.m. on January 23, 2025, FBI Director Kash Patel walked into room 241 of the Rayburn House Office building, like an investigator who had seen too many lies. His navy blue suit was pressed, his FBI badge gleaming on his lapel, and stacks of classified folders sat before him on the mahogany witness table. Behind him, a wall of American flags created the backdrop for what everyone expected to be routine congressional oversight. What nobody anticipated was that in less than an hour, those same flags would witness one of the most spectacular political meltdowns in FBI history. The House Judiciary Committee hearing was supposed to be straightforward. Budget oversight, counterterrorism priorities, the usual dance between Congress and law enforcement. Representative Eric Swalwell, sitting 3 seats from the chairman, had other plans. For weeks, his staff had been digging through FBI transparency reports, FOIA releases, and court filings related to the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. What they found wasn't just troubling, it was potentially career-ending for the man now sitting across from him. Patel had prepared for standard questions about personnel, funding, and operational priorities. His briefing book contained talking points about violent crime reduction, drug trafficking statistics, and counterintelligence successes. What it didn't contain was a strategy for handling the Epstein files. Because his advisors never thought anyone would dare go there, they were wrong. Director Patel, Swalwell began, his voice measured and deliberate. When was the first time you reviewed the Jeffrey Epstein investigation files? The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Patel's jaw clenched almost imperceptibly, a tell that would become crucial in the minutes ahead. Congressman, I've reviewed relevant portions of many ongoing investigations, he responded, his fingers drumming against his portfolio. The evasion was subtle but noticeable. That's not what I asked, Swalwell pressed, leaning forward. I asked when you first reviewed the Epstein files. Specifically, the cameras zoomed in on Patel's face, capturing the moment his composure began its slow crack. His hands, previously steady, developed a slight tremor as he reached for his water glass. The FBI doesn't discuss specifics of ongoing investigations in public hearings, he deflected, his voice taking on a sharper edge. But Swalwell had done his homework. For the next 37 seconds, he methodically dismantled every escape route Patel had carefully constructed. Director, the Epstein investigation was officially closed in August 2019. There are no ongoing elements that would prevent you from answering when you first reviewed the files as FBI director. So I'll ask again, when did you first review them? The silence stretched for exactly 4 seconds. You could hear the hum of air conditioning, the scratch of journalists' pens, the subtle whir of C-SPAN cameras. Patel's face had begun to flush red above his collar. His knuckles were white as he gripped his prepared statement. Congressman, I don't appreciate your implication that I haven't fulfilled my duties as director. That's when Swalwell delivered the haymaker. Director, according to FBI internal memos obtained through FOIA Request 2024-D-47, you haven't reviewed the complete Epstein files as of December 15, 2024. You've been director for 11 months. How do you explain to the American people that you haven't prioritized reviewing materials in what you yourself called the largest sex trafficking case the FBI has ever handled? The room froze. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Even veteran journalists stopped typing. Chairman Jim Jordan, normally quick to defend Republican appointees, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. This wasn't political theater anymore. This was a public execution. Patel's careful composure shattered completely. His voice rose to near shouting level. Congressman Swalwell, your entire career in Congress has been a disgrace to the American people. You can reclaim your time all you want. The words echoed through the marble-walled chamber, broadcast live on C-SPAN to millions of Americans who watched their FBI director lose control in real time. But Swalwell was ready. He had planned for this moment. wargamed Patel's potential responses with his staff. What came next was political jujitsu at its finest. Instead of responding with anger or defensiveness, Swalwell simply smiled, a calm, knowing expression that spoke volumes. "Chairman," he said quietly, "I think the director's outburst speaks for itself. When public servants can't answer basic questions about their responsibilities, they often resort to personal attacks." The devastation was immediate and total. Twitter exploded with meltdown trending within minutes. CNN broke into regular programming. Fox News anchors struggled to defend the indefensible. Political observers who had seen decades of congressional hearings called it career suicide in real time. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted, "When you can't defend your record, attack the questioner." Classic authoritarian playbook. Even conservative commentator Ben Shapiro posted, "This is not how professionals conduct themselves under oath." What made Patel's outburst particularly damaging wasn't just the loss of composure, it was the strategic context. For months, he had positioned himself as the steady hand guiding the FBI through political turbulence. His confirmation hearings had emphasized his prosecutorial experience, his commitment to transparency, his ability to stay above partisan fray. In 47 seconds, that carefully constructed image evaporated. The immediate aftermath was brutal. Within 2 hours, CNN had assembled a panel of former FBI officials who expressed deep concern about the director's temperament. "FBI directors are questioned by hostile lawmakers all the time," explained former Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. "The job requires maintaining dignity and professionalism even under intense pressure." What we saw today was neither. MSNBC's legal analysts were even harsher, with former federal prosecutor Glenn Kirshner calling it conduct unbecoming of the nation's top law enforcement officer. But the real damage came from unexpected quarters. 3 sitting Republican senators issued statements distancing themselves from Patel's behavior. Senator John Cornyn, typically a reliable conservative voice, tweeted, "FBI directors must maintain professionalism regardless of political pressure." Today's hearing fell short of that standard. Even Trump-aligned media struggled to defend the performance, with Sean Hannity telling his radio audience, "Look, I support the director's policies, but we need better answers on the Epstein files." The deeper problem for Patel wasn't just the optics, it was what Swalwell had revealed. Congressional investigators had indeed obtained internal FBI communications, showing that key Epstein files remained unreviewed at the highest levels. Email chains between Patel's office and field investigators showed repeated delays in comprehensive file analysis. Most damaging was a December 2024 memo from Patel's chief of staff, noting director still needs briefing on Epstein materials too sensitive for standard review process. This revelation transformed what could have been a minor embarrassment into a major scandal. If the FBI director hadn't fully reviewed the most notorious trafficking case in recent memory, what did that say about his priorities? If he couldn't maintain composure when questioned about those priorities, what did that say about his fitness for office? The questions multiplied faster than his staff could craft responses. Social media became a hurricane of criticism and mockery. The video clip of Patel calling Swalwell a disgrace was remixed, memed, and shared millions of times. Late-night comedians had a field day. Stephen Colbert's monologue that evening began. Apparently the FBI director directs the real disgrace isn't ignoring sex trafficking files, it's asking about them. The audience erupted in laughter that felt uncomfortable even through television screens. More seriously, the hearing triggered immediate congressional action. Within 48 hours, Democrats had introduced House Resolution 8047, calling for a comprehensive review of FBI leadership practices. The resolution specifically cited unprofessional conduct, potential dereliction of duty, and failure to prioritize critical investigations. While unlikely to pass the Republican-controlled House, it forced GOP members to defend Patel's behavior publicly, a position many found untenable. The FBI Agents Association, the professional organization representing rank-and-file agents, issued an unprecedented statement, expressing concern about recent public representations of bureau professionalism. While carefully worded to avoid directly criticizing their director, The statement was widely interpreted as institutional rebuke. Former FBI Director James Comey, never one to miss political theater, posted on Twitter, "The Bureau deserves better than what America witnessed today." Perhaps most telling was the reaction from Trump himself. The former president, who had nominated Patel specifically for his loyalty and aggressive style, remained conspicuously silent for 36 hours after the hearing. When he finally posted on Truth Social, it was notably lukewarm. "Kash is doing good work at FBI. Fake news making big deal of normal congressional questioning." The absence of Trump's typical superlatives, "fantastic," "the best," "tremendous," spoke volumes about his confidence in his nominee. Inside the FBI, the reaction was immediate institutional embarrassment. Field office supervisors found themselves fielding questions from local law enforcement partners about their director's stability. Intelligence liaisons from allied nations quietly inquired about leadership continuity at the Bureau. Career agents, who had watched directors from both parties maintain dignity under intense political pressure, struggled to explain their boss's public meltdown. The lasting impact went beyond personal embarrassment. Patel's outburst handed Democrats a perfect illustration of their broader criticism, that Trump appointees prioritized loyalty over competence, politics over professionalism. It became a case study in how personal temperament affects institutional credibility. Law enforcement agencies depend on public trust to function effectively. When that trust erodes, investigations suffer, cooperation diminishes, and justice becomes harder to achieve. More immediately, the hearing transformed Patel from aggressor to target. Congressional Democrats, energized by his vulnerability, began demanding additional testimony on everything from counterterrorism funding to domestic surveillance programs. What had been routine oversight became adversarial interrogation. Patel found himself playing defense when he had expected to control the narrative. The Epstein angle, meanwhile, refused to disappear. Victim advocacy groups seized on Swalwell's revelations to demand full file disclosure. If the FBI director hasn't reviewed all the evidence, how can survivors trust that justice is being pursued? Asked Jennifer Arauz, an Epstein victim. In a statement released through her attorney, her words carried moral weight that political spin couldn't diminish. 3 weeks later, when Patel returned to Capitol Hill for a previously scheduled Senate hearing, the dynamic had completely changed. Senators from both parties approached him with barely concealed skepticism. His prepared opening statement included an unprecedented apology. "I regret the tone of my previous testimony and commit to maintaining appropriate decorum in all future congressional interactions." The fact that the FBI director felt compelled to apologize for his conduct said everything about the damage Swalwell's questioning had inflicted. The broader lesson was clear. In modern politics, losing your temper means losing the argument. Patel's substantive points about FBI operations, whatever their merit, were completely overshadowed by his inability to handle direct questioning. His attempt to intimidate Swalwell backfired spectacularly, transforming him from interrogator to defendant in the court of public opinion. As the hearing concluded that January afternoon, Swalwell gathered his papers with quiet satisfaction. He had accomplished more than exposing gaps in FBI file review. He had demonstrated that even the most powerful officials must answer to congressional oversight. His 3-word response to Patel's outburst speaks for itself. Became a masterclass in political aikido, using an opponent's aggression against them. For Kash Patel, the hearing marked a turning point. What began as routine oversight became a career-defining moment of failure. His inability to maintain composure under pressure raised questions about his fitness for one of America's most demanding law enforcement positions. In trying to attack Swalwell, he had revealed his own vulnerabilities for all to see. Sometimes the strongest weapon isn't a badge or a subpoena. It's patience, preparation, and the discipline to let your opponent defeat themselves. Representative Swalwell understood this truth. FBI Director Patel learned it the hard way, in front of millions of Americans who expected better from their institutions and the people who lead them. The ripple effects continued for months. At exactly 3:15 p.m., just 28 minutes after Patel's outburst, Representative Jamie Raskin took to the House floor with a prepared statement that would define the narrative for weeks to come. What we witnessed today wasn't just unprofessional conduct. It was a fundamental betrayal of the FBI's institutional values, Raskin declared, his voice carrying across the chamber with prosecutorial precision. Within hours, his words were trending on every major platform, hashtagged and shared by millions of Americans who had watched their FBI director lose control in real time. Inside FBI headquarters, the damage was already spreading, like wildfire through the organization's carefully maintained hierarchy. Deputy Director Paul Ebate called an emergency meeting of the Senior Executive Service at 6:30 p.m. that same evening. According to sources familiar with the discussion, Ebate's opening remarks were blunt. "We have a credibility crisis that threatens our operational effectiveness worldwide." Field office supervisors reported that local law enforcement partners were already asking pointed questions about bureau leadership stability. International intelligence liaison officers found themselves fielding uncomfortable queries from allied services about continuity at America's premier law enforcement agency. The financial markets reacted with swift brutality. Defense contractors with FBI technology contracts saw their stock prices drop an average of 2.3% in after-hours trading. Government affairs specialists at major corporations began quietly reaching out to congressional staff, seeking assurance that FBI operations would remain stable despite the leadership turmoil. The Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association issued a rare public statement expressing deep concern about the institutional damage caused by today's hearing, language that veteran FBI watchers understood as devastating institutional criticism. But perhaps the most telling reaction came from an unexpected source. Silence from Trump himself lasted exactly 47 hours, unprecedented for a president who typically defended his appointees within minutes of any criticism. When he finally responded on Truth Social, the lukewarm endorsement spoke volumes. Director Patel doing good work despite Dem harassment. Fake news making mountains out of molehills. The absence of Trump's signature superlatives, tremendous, the best, fantastic, signaled to political insiders that even his patron was reconsidering Patel's position. Congressional Republicans found themselves in an impossible position. Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley, who had shepherded Patel's confirmation just 11 months earlier, issued a carefully worded statement calling for professional conduct at all levels of federal law enforcement. The subtext was clear: defend the institution, not the individual. Representative Dan Bishop, one of Patel's most vocal supporters during confirmation, told reporters, Director Patel's policies remain sound, but today's hearing fell short of professional standards. The lasting impact transcended partisan politics. Georgetown Law's Congressional Oversight Clinic immediately incorporated the hearing into its curriculum as a case study in how not to handle congressional questioning. Professor Kerry Johnson noted that Patel's meltdown would be studied for years as an example of how personal temperament affects institutional credibility. When law enforcement leaders lose their composure, they lose their authority, she explained to her students. Authority, once lost, is extraordinarily difficult to restore. 3 months later, when Patel appeared before the Senate Appropriations Committee for routine budget hearings, the dynamic had fundamentally shifted. Senators from both parties approached him with barely concealed skepticism. His prepared remarks included an unprecedented institutional apology: "I deeply regret the tone of my January testimony and commit to maintaining appropriate decorum in all future congressional interactions." The fact that America's top law enforcement officer felt compelled to apologize for his conduct became a defining symbol of institutional degradation under political pressure. The Epstein angle refused to disappear from headlines or congressional agendas. Victim advocacy groups, energized by Swalwell's revelations, organized letter-writing campaigns demanding complete file transparency. Jennifer Araoz, speaking at a press conference 6 weeks after the hearing, captured the broader frustration. If the FBI director hasn't reviewed all the evidence, how can survivors trust that justice is being pursued? Her words carried moral authority that no amount of political spin could diminish or deflect. For Swalwell, the hearing represented career-defining success in congressional oversight. His measured response to Patel's aggression became required viewing in political science courses, studying effective legislative questioning techniques.